Well, hey, good morning, SSCA. I know that right now everybody's got a lot of things on their mind between finals, studying, anything that's going on in your personal life outside of school. I know that this season in the world around us, there's so much brokenness. There's so much that's going on that we have to distract us. And I want to invite you in this time to take all that stuff, all the stuff that you're dealing with right now, and I want you to bring it to the foot of the cross. Bring it to Jesus this morning as we sing this song. Turn up the volume on your laptop or your TV or whatever you're watching this on, and just come before the throne and worship with me. Here we go. You were the Word at the beginning, one with God the Lord Most High. Your hidden glory in creation, now revealed in you are Christ. What a beautiful name it is. What a beautiful name it is. The name of Jesus Christ, my King. What a beautiful name it is. Nothing compares to this. What a beautiful name it is. The name of Jesus. Oh, we are unworthy to stand before you. You didn't want heaven without us. So Jesus, you brought heaven down. My sin was great, your love was greater. So what could separate us now? What a wonderful name it is. What a wonderful name it is. The name of Jesus Christ, my King. What a wonderful name it is. Nothing compares to this. What a wonderful name it is. The name of Jesus. Oh, death could not hold you. The veil tore before you. You silenced the boast of sin and grave. The heavens are roaring the praise of your glory. For you are raised to life again. 'Cause you have no rival, you have no equal. Now and forever, God, you reign. Yours is the kingdom, yours is the glory, yours is the name above all names. What a powerful name it is. What a powerful name it is. The name of Jesus Christ, my King. What a powerful name it is. Nothing can stand against. What a powerful name it is. The name of Jesus. What a powerful name it is. The name of Jesus. Oh. Amen. Amen. All right, upper school. Today, don't forget to take some time out of your day to pursue God, to pursue Him in prayer, to seek after Him in His Word, to read His promises that last forever. And just remember that no matter what's going on, in the good and the bad, in every circumstance, God is for you. He is not against you. You have been called. You have been saved. You have been justified and are being sanctified by a God who is over all things and yet loves you as His own. That is the greatest gift we could ever be given. Have a great day today, SSCA. It was great to get to worship with you today. Take care.
Hello, South Shore Christian Academy. This is Dr. Jennings with your weekly chapel. It's great to be with you again. It's a beautiful day, so I thought I would come outside and do the chapel message a little bit differently. So we may have some other noises. Hopefully, if you're lucky, the noises will be loud enough that you will hear them and not me. Before we begin, great job. Once again, I completely am impressed by every week the work that you guys do. We're almost there. We're almost to the end. In fact, I'll only have one more chapel message after this, and then it's the last week of classes and final chapels. So we are really, really close. I want to look at the Gospel of Matthew. I'm interested in how it starts. Those of you, you know in your creative writing instruction, you're told to begin a story well. Start it right off the bat, something that grabs the reader's attention. The Gospel of John is a great example of this. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was God, and the Word was with God. I mean, that grabs you right off the bat. You're like, I'm in. Or even Luke. I love how Luke starts his gospel. Luke's writing to his friend Theophilus, and he says that that many had undertaken to do this, but he was writing a more orderly account so that Theophilus may have certainty in that which believe. In other words, what Luke is saying is like, I'm a scholar. I've got my doctorate. I've researched it out. I'm giving you something to read, to consider. I mean, it says, okay, I know this is going to be robust. Even Gospel of Mark, right, which is the shortest gospel, gets right into it, starts out with an action punch. Immediately, you're at John the Baptist. But Matthew starts with a genealogy. I mean, come on, Matthew. That's got to be the worst way to start your story. I mean, at least Luke has the good sense to bury his genealogy once he's gotten started. He doesn't lead with it. But Matthew does, and maybe a little bit helps us to understand ancient genealogies. Ancient genealogies were used to introduce a hero. It wasn't uncommon to do that. Ancient biographies and narratives, they would use the genealogy, and they would craft and shape the genealogy to present the best attributes. Because something that was interesting about ancient genealogies, they work different than modern genealogies. A modern genealogy needs to be exhaustive. It needs to be correct and accurate all the way through. No gaps, in other words. An ancient genealogy could have gaps. You couldn't make something up. You couldn't say someone was in your genealogy that wasn't in your genealogy. You couldn't create something whole cloth, but you could skip generations. So, for example, modern genealogy, right? So I have a son, right? One of my sons, his name is Harry. Then there's me. My name's Mark. My dad's name is David. And then my father's name, my grandfather, in other words, is Avery. So it goes, Avery was the father of David, who is the father of Mark, who is the father of Harry, right? That's how a modern genealogy would go. Every generation accounted for. An ancient genealogy could do this. It could go Avery, who was the father of David, who was the father of Harry. Skip me altogether. You know, it could look at my genealogy and go, my place doesn't really give Harry any honor. So we're just going to skip over Mark. You could do that, not a problem. Everyone knows you're doing it. That isn't deceitful. That isn't something. That's just how ancient genealogies worked. You couldn't make something up. Like you couldn't go, Avery was the father of David, who was the father of Captain America, who is the father of Harry. Though I grant you, confusing me with Captain America you wouldn't be the first one to do that. But you couldn't do that in an ancient genealogy. You couldn't make stuff up. So it's to present a hero, to present the best light, and the writer of the genealogy could have a lot of discretion, choice. So let's look at Matthew's genealogy. And I just want to make a couple of points and then we'll be done. First of all, when you read an ancient genealogy, there are going to be some names you're not familiar with. That's all right. Best way to do it, if you're ever asked to read publicly, is do it like I ice skate. When I ice skate, I go as fast as I can, because then I don't fall down. I only fall down when I slow down. All right, so here we go. This is the genealogy of Jesus, the Messiah, the son of David, the son of Abraham. Abraham was the father of Isaac, Isaac the father of Jacob, Jacob the father of Judah and his brothers, Judah the father of Perez and Zerah, whose mother was Tamar, Perez the father of Hezron, Hezron the father of Ram, Ram the father of Amminadab, Amminadab the father of Nahshon, Nahshon the father of Salmon, Salmon the father of Boaz, whose mother was Rahab, Boaz the father of Obed, whose mother was Ruth, Obed the father of Jesse, and Jesse the father of King David. David was the father of Solomon, whose mother had been Uriah's wife. Solomon the father of Rehoboam, Rehoboam the father of Abijah, Abijah the father of Asa, Asa the father of Jehoshaphat, Jehoshaphat the father of Jehoram, Jehoram the father of Uzziah, Uzziah the father of Jotham, Jotham the father of Ahaz, Ahaz the father of Hezekiah, Hezekiah the father of Manasseh, Manasseh the father of Amon, Amon the father of Josiah, and Josiah the father of Jeconiah and his brothers at the time of the exile to Babylon. After the exile to Babylon, Jeconiah was the father of Shealtiel, Shealtiel the father of Zerubbabel, Zerubbabel the father of Abiud, Abiud the father of Eliakim, Eliakim the father of Azor, Azor the father of Zadok, Zadok the father of Akim, Akim the father of Eluid, Eluid the father of Eleazar, Eleazar the father of Mathan, Mathan the father of Jacob, Jacob the father of Joseph, the husband of Mary, and Mary was the mother of Jesus, who was called the Messiah. Thus there were 14 generations in all from Abraham to David, 14 from David to the exile to Babylon, and 14 from the exile to the Messiah. Riveting, right? Absolutely riveting. So, why does Matthew do this? Well, Matthew's wanting us to tell us something about Jesus. The Gospel of Matthew is about who Jesus is. That's the fundamental question. And he's using his genealogy to tell us something. And he begins by first making sure we understand that Jesus is connected to David and to Abraham. Abraham, who was the father of Israel, and the promises that were made to Abraham that all the nations would be blessed through him. And David, who was the king, the great king of Israel, and he received a promise as well that his kingdom would never pass. There would be one who would come. And so already Matthew is saying this Jesus is connected to the promises of Abraham and is connected to the promises of David. And the very first verse told us that. But more is happening here. There's some things in Jesus' genealogy that are really bizarre as ancient genealogies go. Remember, you could pick and choose who you put in your genealogy. You could make sure your genealogy was full of Captain Americas, and you could skip the junk if you wanted to. But Matthew doesn't do that. In fact, he brings that out. The first thing he does that is incredibly uncommon is he has women named in his genealogy. Ancient genealogies never named women. Women in the ancient world were considered to have less honor than men, and you know, of course, so to put a woman in a genealogy was strange in and of itself. But look at the women that Matthew chooses. First, he chooses Tamar. Tamar was not Jewish. Also, there's some scandal associated with Tamar. Then Rahab, not Jewish, and there's scandal associated with Rahab. Then you get to Ruth. There's no scandal with Ruth, but she wasn't Jewish. And then you have the father of David, right? David was the father of Solomon, whose mother had been Uriah's wife, right? Which is a very interesting way of presenting it. See, Matthew is reminding us that David so wanted Bathsheba that he had Uriah, her husband, killed through like military, by fiat, if you will. Why is Matthew doing this? I mean, if you're going to mention a woman, at least mention Sarah. She was a great hero of the faith. At least it would make more sense. Why women at all, let alone women with scandal, let alone non-Jewish women? And then you look at some of the kings. And there are some good kings that are mentioned, but there's some nasty, messed up kings that are mentioned. Why? Well, I think part of that starts to introduce who Jesus is. That Jesus didn't just come for the established and the beautiful. That he came for the disenfranchised. He came for the Gentiles who were not considered to be part of the good God's people. He didn't just come for the Jewish people. He came from Jew and Gentile. He didn't just come for the honored male in that society. He came for male and female. He came for women as well. And he certainly didn't just come for the holy. He came for the sinners. In fact, Matthew later on will say to us, Joseph will be told, you shall name him Jesus, for he shall save his people from their sins. You see, the story of Jesus is a story where his family line is messed up. And that's who he came for. He came for the messed up, the broken, the beaten down, the powerless. The story of Jesus' genealogy also tells us more. You see, Matthew broke it up into very interesting divisions. At the end, there was the time of the patriarchs, right? That was the time of Abraham, and then the sons and the tribes. And the time of Abraham ends with the time of the kings, which starts with David. Right? So you have the time of the patriarchs, followed by the time of the kings. And then the time of the kings end with the exile. Right? That's how Matthew divides it up. So patriarchs, kings, exile. And then at the end of the exile is Jesus. You see, what Matthew is telling us that the exile didn't simply end when the Jewish people were able to return to the land. That the exile, the true separation from God, ended when Jesus came. That our exile from God ended with the arrival of the Messiah. The Gospel of Matthew will tell us that Jesus is Emmanuel, God with us. And at the end of the Gospel of Matthew, Jesus will say, I am with you always, even to the end of the age. This is the beauty of the genealogy. He's not only the answer to the promise given to Abraham. He's not only the answer to the promise given to David. He is the answer to the exile. Our separation with God comes to an end. You know, there's no family line so far gone that Jesus can't do an amazing work in it. We see it in his family line. You know, my mother was the youngest of 8 or 9. I always forget. Anyway, she was the youngest of a bunch. Her dad died at a pretty young age, and so she was at church camp, and that's when my mom heard the gospel. They weren't really church going at the time. Heard the gospel and became a Christian. Now, she was the youngest of 8 or 9. She was the youngest, but she was the first one to hear the gospel. And God used that moment like a beachhead. It was like D-Day, if you will, onto the beachhead of that family, where all of a sudden my mom became a follower of Christ, went from enemy of Jesus to follower of Jesus, from exiled to child. And then from that, God would do a mighty work so that all of my mom's brothers and sisters would become followers of Christ. My grandmother would become a follower of Christ, and it would continue. My aunts and my uncles would marry followers of Christ, and they would have children who would become followers of Christ, who also would have children who would become followers of Christ. You know, my sister and I, we follow Jesus, and my sons follow Jesus. Like that. It all began because of one girl at church camp heard the gospel. That family was not gone. God was going to do a mighty work in my mom's family that would continue through the generations. Jesus' family line had a lot of ugly in it. It had a lot of kings that had done some wicked things, but God was going to do amazing things through that bloodline. Jesus' genealogy tells us this. In fact, I look at the way Matthew starts the gospel and I think, why wouldn't you start it this way? Why would you not start a story about the hero who came from a messed up genealogy so that his father God could make children of all the nations, saving them from their wickedness and bringing them back out of exile? Now that's a good way to start a story. Thank you for letting me spend a little bit of time with you. I hope you have a wonderful and blessed week. God bless.